Crystal Stokes here with Get Stoked, a podcast with real and raw conversations with leaders of all types, business owners, managers, executives, and more. Get stoked by their honest and insightful stories and key takeaways that you can use to improve your leadership abilities. Now, if you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe and share it with others. Your support and feedback really makes a difference. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, everybody, Crystal Stokes here, and I'm with Dr. David DiMeo. And today we are going to be talking about some very important topics in the veterinary profession, particularly around the stressors that people are facing on a regular basis and how to maintain a positive mindset throughout those difficult times. Dr. David, would you mind introducing yourself, telling us a bit about your history and your journey, because you've been in the field for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm a veterinarian. I currently practice in a one-person practice in Evergreen, Colorado, here in the beautiful foothills, southwest of Denver. We're about an hour from the ski areas and about an hour from Denver, so it's a good place to be. It's a fun place to live. Mount Snow-capped peaks this time of year off in the distance, and we have lots of wildlife. Very often there'll be elk greeting me as I drive in the parking lot in the morning. Mm-hmm. So it's a really great place to live, except when it snows in May. We're supposed to get snow this weekend.
That's so Colorado.
Yeah.
And you didn't start off here, right? So you were not from Colorado originally. Tell us about your journey.
I'm originally from Rhode Island. I grew up on the East Coast with the Atlantic Ocean. My grandparents had a nice summer cottage where I spent a lot of years on the ocean, sailing and fishing and diving and doing all kinds of summertime stuff as a child and teenager till I went away to college and fell in love with the Midwest. Went to school, undergrad in Iowa and vet school in Illinois, graduated in 1983. And went back to Rhode Island, practiced there for a long time, and moved to Colorado about 9 or 10 years ago.
Got it. And I know that you've seen quite a spread when it comes to working in your own private practice, as well as being in corporate.
Yes, I've done both. I mean, most of my career is in private practice, but I've worked for 3 different corporations, probably not a whole lot, probably cumulatively about 5 years. They had different, cultures, and I found out that the corporate culture was not for me. Maybe for lots of people, probably like the corporate culture, but I'm more of an independent person.
And what is it you think you like about working for yourself?
Well, I have a lot more control over my destiny. It's not so much that I don't want to be the boss. When I walked in this morning, someone said to me, "Hi, boss," and I said, "Don't call me that." It's just your own life. I've never viewed myself as controlling others, more offering guidance, just advice and guidance and counsel when needed, and for a common goal, and it's to take care of our patients and do the best we can with that. Every one of our patients comes with a human attached to it, so we have to not only take care of our patients, but take care of the concerns and anxieties, that a person might have when their beloved pet is ill.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we definitely have to take care of the animal and the person that's attached. And I think that is often a point of stress, often in the veterinary field. I know many people I've spoken to say, "Oh, I went into veterinary medicine because I didn't really like people, or I didn't feel comfortable with people. I felt more comfortable with animals." And I think they naively go into the field forgetting that a lot of your work actually is engaging with people.
Well, and people have different motivations, different needs, and especially financial. This is like any other business in the current economic environment. We're being squeezed by inflation. Our employees need raises. to keep up. We have to pass those costs along, as well as supplies and equipment that we use. Just it's crazy the way prices are going up when you can get them. We run into a lot of back orders, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of stressors for everybody. But I think of my first experience with a cat. I was 5 years old, and one of my neighbors 2 houses up the street had a cat that had a litter. And the mother of my friend at the time just asked me if I'd like one. And I took one home and I walked in the house. I said, Daddy, look what I got. Of course, now my parents were the World War II and Depression generation, and they didn't know pets. They never had a pet, never thought of having a pet. And my father was a mailman. The first thing he said was, get rid of it. So I didn't get rid of it. I made it a little bed and a litter box in the garage, and that's where it lived for many years. Some point, it was a tomcat. We didn't neuter it, we didn't vaccinate it, we didn't really know anything about it, but I knew I loved that cat. Oh. And I think my parents were kind of surprised. But even several years after that, I overheard my mother talking to one of her friends, a couple of her friends who were visiting, and she didn't know I heard her. Until the day she died. She didn't know I knew what she said, but she was telling her friends of how sensitive it was and how caring I was. And, so I think until that moment, they didn't really have a clue of where my motivations were.
It's just so inherent. It was just in you from the start.
Yeah, it was something, I guess you can call it genetic or just emotional, whatever it was. I don't know, but I never gave up that passion for pets.
Okay, this is a perfect segue, because what I'm wondering, what we connected on when we spoke earlier was very much around this topic of burnout, the stressors that veterinarians and their staff are facing, and how to get through that. Like, you had a lot of longevity in your career. Here you are on the cusp of retiring at some point in the not too distant future, and you have a scope of knowledge that's different than somebody coming in that's been practicing for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So I'd really like to hear how you have held on to that passion and that love of the work and maintain that throughout time, or maybe the ebbs and flows. Maybe there were times where you lost it for a little while and then it came back. How did you deal with the stress, the burnout, the load? What has that been like for you?
Well, any veterinarian, probably most professional people, we want to do the best for our patients. And of course, we can't save every single one. We lose some. That's life. Death is a part of life. Illness is a part of life. And I think it's really hard. You graduate and you've got all this knowledge. Now you have to put it to use. And back up just a bit. I had a classmate once describe 4 years of vet school as a 4-year slog through oatmeal, which, because it is intense. You're doing a lot of stuff, late nights, all night studying, clinic rotations, and that kind of. There's a lot to learn in 4 years, and they don't teach you everything. I mean, my first few months in the job, I realized, there's still a lot I got to learn. Getting back to that, so you want to do the best for your patients, and when you can't, because it just isn't in the cards, and because the big guy upstairs says it's time, I'm calling you home. That can be a hard thing to swallow at times, but we have to, and you can feel like you failed. You can feel really down and out, particularly where you have a nice, clients who really love their animal and they're willing to go every mile, and there's nothing you can do except ease their passing. Mm-hmm. Which I've had MDs who tell me, I wish I could do that for my patients when their time is up. But that doesn't make it any easier. I've been, 39 years in active practice, and it's still as hard today as it was when I first started many years ago.
I feel like you're speaking to the word that we often hear is compassion fatigue, that there's so much, people that go into veterinary medicine are often very heart-centered people. They feel deeply. They have a strong intuitive and empathetic ability. And they feel for the animal, they feel for the animal's owner, they feel themselves, and there's a lot of emotion.
There is, and I've had situations. I remember this so clearly. For a time, I did house calls, and I remember very distinctly a family. They had 3 young girls, and they had 2 dogs, and I would go there usually a couple times a year to take care of their dogs. And mom and dad eventually get divorced. I remember the little girls growing up, becoming adults. And then they started coming to me, bringing me their pets. And so I saw all phases of their life. Dogs get sick and then they pass away that I took care of for 10 or more years.
Yeah.
See that it's compressed, unlike, human medicine. I mean, how many MDs really see their patients from birth to death? Mm-hmm. None, probably. I see that actually quite often. A little tiny puppy that somebody brought home, and they're all happy, enthusiastic, and the years go by, and that puppy ages, gets old, maybe gets ill, and passes. Mm-hmm. So you start to see it from start to finish. I have the same thing right now. I have a 15-year-old golden retriever who I brought home at 7 weeks old.
Yes, I know.
Still going strong. She still loves life.
Yeah.
15 is amazing for a golden.
It is. I feel like what we're coming into here are the different things that do contribute to the load and the stress that veterinarians are facing. So let's talk about a few more of those elements that are contributing to the stress of the job. And then I want to hear about how you have kept a positive mindset and kept yourself well and healthy throughout those stressors. So I know another one we had talked about would be around burnout. And I think the contributing factors being coming out with a lot of student debt, working really long hours. Can you speak to some of these things that contribute to burnout in your opinion?
Well, in my case, when I first graduated, I had a lot of debt, worked long hours, and I took a lot of extra shifts just to earn extra money so I could pay off my student loans. I wasn't married then, didn't have a family, so it was a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have a family, particularly if you have children, it's harder to do that, to be away more hours. But I paid off my student loans actually a little bit early. I eventually went on, started, moved away, associate role from the house call role, and started a more conventional practice. Then you have the stressors. Okay, now I'm in charge. Now I have to make decisions. I mean, that first few years of working 80, 100 hours a week, setting up the practice, buying equipment, setting up procedures, protocols, hiring support staff. So you get that added. You're doing everything yourself. So, the chief bottle washer, cook and bottle washer. I remember one day, it was the first few weeks that I had opened my practice, and it was the end of the day, and I was mopping the floors in the waiting room. And a lady walks in and looks at me and says, "Is the doctor here?" And I looked at her and I said, "Just a minute, he's in the back, I'll go get him." And I just went in the back and put on my white coat and came back out front. And she was so embarrassed.
That's a great story. This is very common though for people that start their own practice. Well, and I've heard people say that they wish that they had training in business operations because that's often just learned on the fly, kind of piecing it together. You were focused on learning medicine, not necessarily how to operate your own business. There's a lot to learn.
Well, and I had maybe a tiny leg up in that as an undergraduate, before going to vet school, I had hoped to own my own practice. And I did take classes on accounting and economics as electives, which were useful, but it still didn't make me an accountant or anything. Mm-hmm. But I had a basis and I knew what kind of books to keep. And, this was the days before QuickBooks and, computers.
Back when we used paper and calculators.
Yeah, well, yeah, the first electronic calculator I had that did the 4 basic functions cost $100.
Wow.
In 1980 dollars. So that was quite expensive by today's standards. And now the pocket ones are, what are they, $1.99, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot to it. So the point is, that's all added stress. And so in addition to being a doctor and trying to do the best for your patients and your clients, then you also have the added stress of managing books, making sure you don't run afoul of some taxing authority, payroll taxes, paying your bills, keeping up with the regulatory environment. As time goes on, you become more successful and the practice grows and hire more help. You hire a practice manager, hire bookkeepers and those kind of things to take that load off. And after about probably 10 years, I was able to cut back quite significantly, hire associate doctor. The practice was quite successful. I, hired my first associate probably about 8 or 9 years into it. And then that helped me do less, but still working full time. It took off a big load.
So throughout the arc of this, what were some of the things that helped keep you afloat? Did you ever struggle with lows that, we hear so much now? There's so much media attention given to the increased suicide rates in the veterinary field. More and more people are leaving the field, not interested in working in it anymore. So advice, do you have any tips for people that are...
I had my lows, I had plenty of those.
Yeah.
At one point I described it as taking off my rose-colored glasses. I would, have discouraged, maybe I had an animal pass, or it was just a real super busy day, and I'd go home and my body would ache from, head to toe, and just from the high volume. Nowadays, pretty standard, we do an appointment, we schedule 30-minute appointments. My first job, we scheduled 4 appointments every 15 minutes. And we had 2 doctors. It was a big hospital. There were 12 doctors there. But they had 2 doctors seeing appointments. So that's 7.5 minutes per appointment per doctor. But we had a lot more support staff too. And then of course, walk-ins and emergencies on top of that. So yeah, that was stressful. And I don't know, I got through it and I did it. Kept a positive attitude, kept thinking about the animals that I was helping, and tried to ignore the crabby clients, the disagreeable ones, and focus on the good ones. And I'll tell you, this week, this is a Wednesday, and Monday I had somebody sent us a box of cookies to thank us for taking care of their patients who were here, their pets who were here boarding. And another lady, I started trying to go out multiple times a week and just taking a long walk at lunchtime, especially when the weather is nice. I was coming back in that same day, walking back into the building, getting ready for the first afternoon appointment, and a lady drives up and hands me a bouquet of flowers.
Yeah. That stuff really makes a difference.
It's all worthwhile,
Yeah.
And of course, later in the afternoon, then we had somebody who was being crabby and complaining about what we charged them, for their bill. But, it is what it is. We set our prices where we have to, pay our bills and pay our employees, not because I'm trying, I'm probably, for a practice owner, I don't take much out of the practice for myself as salary. I mean, I probably ought to be, as a practice owner, I could probably justify 2 or 3 times what I take for myself.
Yeah.
But this practice has been around a long time, and the building is kind of needs some updates and repairs, and that's where I'm putting our profits, improving the practice.
So I want to highlight something you just said, because it's very important. I think this is something that I want people listening to really take home. And I know this as a therapist, there is a lot of clinical evidence to support the practice of receiving gratitude and letting yourself deeply feel it. We've heard a lot of buzz about practicing gratitude, like every day have a gratitude journal and write down the things you're grateful for. And that's great. But what the evidence shows is actually more effective to elevating mood and keeping you feeling positive is to reflect on things where you have received gratitude, where somebody has said to you, you made such a difference. Thank you for what you do. I really appreciate you. To feel that, because many people, and I know I was one, have this bad habit of, if you were to compliment me, say, Crystal, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you did. I'd say, oh, and it was nothing. Don't even just discount it. I just push it away. And in my brain, I don't let myself store it. I don't let myself feel it. So that compliment, that positive feedback, that gratitude was wasted. That is not a good practice. So you are describing the opposite. I want to highlight that for people listening. If you're not doing that currently, please right away start letting yourself receive the gratitude people give you and notice the positive parts of your work. Notice how much you love the animals. Notice the impact that you're making and focus more of your attention on those things and less of your attention on, like you said, the crabby clients.
Well, it's so easy to be negative.
Yeah.
And nobody writes books about how to be negative. But there's whole sections in libraries and in bookstores on having positive attitudes. I think it's a harder thing to do.
Yeah.
But showing, and that's something I had to learn over the years. Just say thank you and say, oh, that's so nice. It's so wonderful. Oh, this is wonderful. The staff will love this. And if somebody, the box of cookies really came we have a boarding kennel here, and the box of cookies came for the boarding kennel, really, because those two dogs are still here boarding. So it really belonged to them. But we share with everybody here, not just the kennel staff, the whole veterinary staff as well, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. This is one facility, and I want us to all get along, and I want us to have a family atmosphere. I like to see my client, the staff, the support staff, smiling when I walk in the morning. Know that they're happy to be here, that they see the importance of their jobs, because that's how I feel. There are plenty of people who would have retired after 20 years, rather than still going, 39 plus. Actually, just last Sunday, that was my 39th anniversary from graduation.
Wow.
So, yeah, looking for 40 now. I'm in my 40th year.
That's fabulous. So, this is so key, that it's the culture that you're developing within your company. The way we show up and the way we think about things is contagious. So you coming in and with that mindset of, I want everybody here to want to be here, to enjoy being here, to know that what they're doing matters, and to have that be a continuous theme on a daily basis, that people enjoy coming to work. They want to be there. It has a family environment. That's up to you to create. That's up to the people that are listening to this to create every day. If I come in with a bad attitude, it's contagious. It spreads very easily. We call it emotional contagion. But positivity can also spread as well. So let's try to spread more positivity.
I've had plenty of relatives, both living and not living, who were very negative. Like, that guy's stupid, or that person is stupid, or whatever. And I say, well, that may be true, but they have a different perspective than we have, or than you have. And, my mother was fond of repeating my grandfather's line, who I never knew, he passed before I was born, of walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And I think where the difficulty comes in, we all want to do well, we all want to be liked, but there's different ways to go about it. So, you're going to, again, old adages, right? Catch more flies with sugar than sour grapes. And if you're pleasant to people, they're going to gravitate towards you. And sometimes, we're all human. You never know that person walking down the street on the other side of the sidewalk, what that person is dealing with in their lives. So be kind, be nice, be understanding, because they could be hurting. And the odds are they are about something.
Yes.
It's just life. And it depends on how you handle it. So I'm happy to report we've been, like most hospitals, we've been short-staffed, and we've been able to make some gains this week. In addition to having those nice gratitude, the flowers and the cookies, we hired someone who I think is going to be really outstanding for us. I consider it the other hospital's loss because this person was let go. And I'm really like, okay, we got it. Now we can really move forward. We got our staffing needs fulfilled. We're nearly fulfilled. No, I'm happy about that. And yeah, I got to pay another salary, but it's going to take a load off for everybody. It's going to hopefully make our clients happier, allow us to give better care. And that's my focus.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Yeah. It reminds me of the glass half full. You can look at it one way, you can look at it another way. And I also appreciate you bringing in this idea of having compassion for other people. As a psychotherapist, I agree with you that when we observe another person acting, maybe they seem like they're in a bad mood or they're being kind of aggressive or defensive. If we were to investigate why that's happening, what they may be experiencing, it's often that they are hurting. Think about yourself. If I think about myself, whenever I'm acting in that way, it's usually that I'm struggling. Yeah. And when we take that into account, I think it helps us soften and not take it personally that a person is behaving in a way that it's okay to allow them to have their moment and to still treat them with kindness and compassion.
And, and a lot of those people, after they go home and calm down, they realize what they did was inappropriate and they'll apologize. Mm-hmm. And I find that more here in the mountain towns than I do in the big cities. Mm-hmm. Our kennel manager, who's sitting off over here to my left, told me about an experience where somebody came in, as a dog had boarded for a little while, and it was going home, and this guy was just really upset, and he was yelling and screaming, and someone else walked in and literally got in his face and told him to lay off, that he's being inappropriate. And he finally left. Well, every time he sees the kennel manager now, he apologizes to her. Mm-hmm. That's been going on for a few months, I think.
Yeah.
And that's still brings his dog here for daycare or for boarding.
Yep.
So yeah, we don't know what his story was, but he had a bad day that day.
Yeah. We are human, and that's okay. So on that note, we're coming up on the end of our time today. I already have like 3 things pinned that I'd love to talk with you about in more detail just from this conversation, but we'll save it for another time. I want to just ask a takeaway for people listening. Again, I really want your opinion on this because you've been doing this for almost 40 years. What are some habits, daily practices, or it could be longer term things that you would do on a regular basis that have helped keep you buoyant and positive and healthy throughout your career?
Well, I like to learn new things still. And even after 39 years, probably the younger veterinarians are more up on the newer techniques and things. I've always been a big believer in continuing education, and there were years when I've done 80 or 100 hours a year because I like to travel and I like to go to these meetings. I like to learn new things. Requirement in Colorado for continuing education is 32 hours every 2 years for license renewal. So, I do like triple or quadruple that usually because it's fun. Because I like going to different places and I like going to the meetings and I like sitting in the lecture halls and I like learning new things. And even with all that, I'm not going to be as up on the newest and greatest things as someone who's been out of school less time. So I use a lot of reference books and I'm always looking up new things, learning new things, and listening and paying attention to what other people tell me. Mm-hmm. Just yesterday, somebody said something that had started the gears in my head turning, and I realized that I needed to change tax, and they didn't even know they said it to me. But it started the gears turning, and it helped me treat a patient better.
Oh, right. I'm right there with you. I love to learn. I'm a knowledge junkie. My family makes fun of me. They say my grandfather and I got bit by the bug.
But I also love to do things that have nothing at all to do with the profession.
You mentioned you scuba dive.
Yeah, I started scuba diving shortly after I graduated from vet school, and I eventually became a certified instructor. It's actually how I met my wife. I was teaching scuba diving out of a dive shop in Providence, and she had just gotten certified herself from a dive shop in Connecticut, but she bought her equipment at the shop where I was teaching. And because she was also a veterinarian, the guy that ran the dive shop said, "Hey, you got to meet her. You know, she's a diver and she's a veterinarian and she's cute." And I said, "Okay, give me your phone number." And he goes, "I don't have it." But he got it for me. And she came in and got all her equipment. And we had our first date on New Year's Day that year.
Wow.
We went diving on New Year's Day off of Narragansett, Jamestown, Rhode Island, which the water's pretty cold in January. I had a dry suit. She had a wet suit. And that was our first date, and it was a blast. The first time we spoke on the phone, it was like one of those effortless conversations. And now we have 5 kids, and we've been married 32 years.
Isn't that wonderful? I love that story.
Matter of fact, our honeymoon was in Bonaire, which is the ABC Islands off the coast of Venezuela. And it was a scuba diving vacation, and she was so into it. I'm going, honey, it's our honeymoon. And all she was interested is reading books about the fish she was seeing.
Birds of a feather, you two.
Yeah. So the scuba diving kind of brought us together more than veterinary medicine did. Veterinary medicine was the icing on the cake.
Isn't that beautiful? So very good points here. Takeaways are have interests outside of your work, like have that diversity in what you're doing. That's been really helpful to you.
Yeah, and as our children grew up, they were really interested in hockey, and so we were into their sports and traveling around as they played their sports. And kind of late starter, but in my 40s, I got interested in hockey and I started playing hockey.
Nice.
Just because the kids were, it's, I don't know what the word for that is. Vicarious, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and then, of course, you got a little bit old for hockey, so I kind of eventually had to give it up. But a lot of things, you live your life through your kids, you do. And it's just part of parenting. But it's also a lot of fun. We had a great time doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Never lost sight of how important my kids were to us. And we were fortunate that when we had our own practice, we were able to split our hours. She would work mornings and I would work afternoon and evenings. And one of us was always home with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
One of us was, when they were little, one of us was always home with them. They never went into daycare. Very often when they were the preschool years or in kindergarten, I would put them on the bus and then go to work, and my wife would be there when they got home, or vice versa.
Isn't that fabulous?
So we're fortunate that we had that flexibility, and it was all because we owned our own practice. A lot of it. From what I'm reading, there's less interest in practice ownership. Plus, it's harder to buy a practice. The multiples of what practices are selling for, the corporations just running up the prices, which is great if you've got a practice to sell, but it's not so great if you want to buy a practice.
Right. Well, so David, I'll pin that one for a later discussion since we're coming up on time today. I just wanted to summarize a couple of the things that we touched on today. One would be really maintaining a positive attitude, feeling gratitude in the moments that you can, really receiving that and letting it in. Having a diversity in the things that you do in your life, making time for the things you love, like family, scuba diving, and continuous learning, always challenging yourself, keeping your mind fresh, and seeking out new opportunities. So I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I've had a great time. I think Hexy Cat has too. She keeps popping in for these.
Like my cat.
Really? This is a girl. Her name is Hexy.
She's a girl. She's a tortie.
She's a tortie. That's right.
Yeah.
And so today, if people listening are interested in connecting with you, they may want to find out more about your hospital. Maybe they want some mentorship about how they're doing in their practice. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, our website is mountainparksvet, that's parks plural.com. And my personal email address is Dr. DiMeo, which is DRDIMEO at mountainparksvet.com.
Okay, wonderful. I will put all of that in the show notes so people can find it. And I really appreciate your time today. I had a blast.
All right. Nice talking to you, Crystal.
You too. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.